We're in full swing now with plant propagation in the spring, making divisions and cuttings and all sorts of wonderful things. In a recent video I just talked about the idea of tip layering, and we looked at how last year's tip layering efforts panned out for us. And in the similar spirit, last season I made a video about stool layering, which I'll link to here, where I describe a very, very simple system. I won't go into great detail here, but the synopsis: certain plants, if you pile soil or sand or sawdust, basically rooting material around the base of the stems, if it's the right type of plant, they will root into it. In this case, I have a black currant here that is absolutely the right type of plant for stool layering. And I'll say this, 2 years ago, I invested in a few varieties of black currant that were new to me. I bought them from a good friend of mine, Roger Ort. His nursery is called Ort Family Farms. I'll link to it in the description. All sorts of really interesting old heirloom varieties of plants. And so I invested $15 in getting this Slitsa Black Currant, which to me was new at the time. And last year I put in the effort, I'll say effort with air quotes, of, as I was digging out a waterway, throwing some muck against the stem, the base stem of this plant. And what I'd love to do here is now, after a year of it being stool layered, is dig this plant up and show you from that initial investment of $15 and putting muck around the base of it, how many plants do I actually have. So, bear with me as I go a little through here. This is also an opportunity to incredibly decompact the soil in the nursery beds and do some spring weeding and cleaning. So I'm using a nice sharp nursery spade here, and I'm trying to get under this whole plant. Now if you're trying to be gentle with your parent plant, with stool layering, the beauty part is what you can do before I dig this whole thing up, is I can pull the soil back and see that this plant has rooted. And if I wanted to be very, very gentle and keep my mother plant fully intact, I could simply pull the sand or sawdust, or in this case soil, away and snip below that soil line. This is a good place to use pruners that you don't mind getting beat up just a little. It's a big fat root. So this was just a stem 2 years ago, and that absolutely is ready to be moved out. Now, knowing that black currant roots so readily, there's no reason why I couldn't. Sorry, Sasha is filming over a creek, so that's, if you see the camera jump around, it's because she's trying to deal with me saying, hey, could you stand on a creek and film me? So thanks for doing that.
Thank you, okay.
So I could even say, well, there's a plant, there's not much roots, but because I know currants root so readily, it's very easy to plant this out, and this should absolutely grow. And of course, notice I'm doing all of this before bud break, before it loses dormancy. And as we know from hardwood cuttings, which we talked about in the fall, I could plant this one out as a rooted cutting and have 3 more plants that I could stick in the soil and root out. So there's 4 more plants. Here is another relatively well-rooted plant. I'd want to make sure I plant this somewhere where I'm keeping an eye on it and giving it nice soil and maybe watering it for the first season. And again, by taking the top and reducing it down a little bit.
You're going so fast that I don't know if people can...
I'll go a little slower. Okay. By reducing the top down a little bit, I'm able to take some hardwood cuttings. So there's 6 more plants for next year.
And they're all facing the direction they need to get planted
Exactly.
in the ground.
So they all are, I can take them in a new bed and simply push them in, and that should root and become a plant like this in about 2 years. It's stunning how well they work. So far I've gotten 6 cuttings, 2, 3. This one's a really nicely rooted plant. And in fact, this has enough roots, I'll leave this entire top and plant this out as it is. And that's all before I've even dug up this mother plant. So stool layering can let me get a whole lot of duplication before I even really start disturbing the soil. Question you may ask here is, well, what the heck, man? Why are you digging this poor thing up? Very reasonable question. It's a little bit of an awkward position in the garden. It's growing with tons of vigor, so I'd like to actually move this into a more open position. And this way I can get as many copies as I can and leave this soil, this really rich soil, open for other propagation needs. Or maybe we grow some zucchini or rutabaga or something else here for a season. So there we go. Bear with me. This is where I would do a time lapse, but Sasha says, let's quit that time lapse stuff for a minute. So.
No, not fully, but just not as much of that sped up. I don't like when it's all sped up. It's not realistic.
So, here is 2 years in the soil, a little yellow dock that lets you know it's been here for a while. That comes out beautifully. We can use that to make medicine if we choose to. And now, I'll gently shake the soil off. This gives you just a sense of how much plant material came from planting this plant in rich garden soil. This one I'll take one long cutting from. So there's 4 beautifully rooted plants. And now we're getting into the actual serious material. There's a significantly rooted plant. Very easily you could find this online for $25 or $30 for a plant that size. This will produce fruit this year. Here's another side shoot. Hopefully it doesn't seem like I'm too rough and tumble with this plant. I've just worked with them long enough to know I can be a little quick with them and have no problems.
Wow.
That is a stunner.
Yeah, that's nice.
And last but not least, these two are together. I think I could break this apart, but the more generous thing to this plant is to say, let's keep this intact. And I can either, well, I have my Slitsa tag here. I could simply plant this back in the ground a little bit deeper and in a year have all those copies. But I'm going to move this to a new location as well. The initial plant that I bought, I would say, was about that size. So 2 years ago I bought Slitsa Black Currant for $15 from Ort Family Farms. Really awesome nursery. Check them out in the description. And from that one plant, I now have 6 nicely rooted sections that will fruit, 2 massive, beautiful, full production age currants that will produce a lot of fruit, and a whole bunch of cuttings. Propagation. Even if you don't want to be a nursery to sell plants, strongly encourage you to get into propagation. Your small investments can become absolutely massive plantings. We're going to be in Slitsa production this year. I haven't eaten the fruit yet, so I'm excited to see. Thank you for watching.